Welcome to the Alex Dynasty podcast. I'm your host, Jordan McNamara. This is a audio clip from a Zoom call that I did to correspond with the release of the Analytics of Dynasty, the Dynasty Teambuilding Guide, which is now available on the website. So you can go ahead and get that today. And you can also enjoy the podcast and listen to the call, the audio of the call that we did. Talked about some stuff, took some questions, had a good conversation, did a little AOD State of the Union as well. So you can go check all that out. It's about an hour, so 55 minutes, I think, or an hour in that range. So you can go check all that out, and then go ahead and get your Dynasty Team Building Guide, and if you haven't already, and consider subscribing to the website. You can use the promo code here. It'll be AOD 2023 for 20% off first time subscribers. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. So thanks for listening to this, and until next time, continue to embrace the variance. We'll talk again very soon. All right, welcome to the Analytics of Dynasty pre-order release party. We're going to call it a party. This is the fifth book, and so I do have some questions. I'm just going to run down some stuff from the book, and then I will take specific questions. Obviously, this is sort of early in the process of this book being released. I think I officially released it maybe like 3 hours ago, so I don't think anyone's probably read it yet. So a couple of things that are different about this book. And a couple of things that I'm excited about with this book. So as I was writing, I almost didn't write a 2023 edition of Analytics Dynasty. I had gotten kind of the point of like, after last year's one, like I thought like, what sort of more, like it felt like we were kind of drilling down on some stuff. But I didn't have like it felt like something was missing. And so I, really kicked around the idea of not doing one. I spent a lot of time researching and just sort of researching for the sake of researching this off season. And then I sort of got into the process of like, well, what we don't really have, and one of the things that we, for subscribers, right, for Analytics of Dynasty subscribers, and this is one of the things that like I think it's interesting from like a almost a bias perspective, right? I've actually learned a lesson from Dynasty from this experience, which is when you surround yourself with a bunch of people that are thinking about the same thing and talking about the same thing and experiencing the same thing, and you spend a lot of time with these people, you tend to see the world the same way. And that's not a bad thing, but if you're an Analytics Dynasty subscriber, if you're in the group chat, if you're listening to 300 plus podcasts a year, we have a little bit of groupthink. Which again, I think our group thinks probably better than a lot of group think, right? I think our way of building teams is the superior way, but that doesn't mean we're perfect. So that was one of the things that I really sort of came back to. The other thing that I had sort of failed to capture was sort of like a grand theory, right? And I hadn't, I've kind of captured it in my own mind. I'd captured it kind of in in a lot of the stuff that we, some simple rules, right? When the trade question comes into me, how do we react to it? Well, like there's only like, I don't know, 30 or 40 different ways we could actually react to that question. Typically, it's all a pattern, right? It's probably even less than that. It's probably like 10, right? Like if we're really being honest with ourselves, what we're doing is it's a lot of patterns, right? And so we end up sort of thinking that way. And so almost to the point of where I felt a little bit stale in the writing process, it kind of dawned on me that what feels stale about the writing process is that we're not actually sharing what we're doing in terms of building teams. And that was the thing for me that I said, let's do something different. Let's tackle it in a big way. I don't typically love writing about my teams. It has been some of the best reacted to content, which is interesting when I write about my teams and some of the decisions that I make, especially the failures. Those have been some of the best reactions that I've gotten from people. But it's never something that I love to do just because I don't think I don't think content with like, hey, I'm going to talk about what I did in my draft is the most compelling stuff. But I do think it's compelling from the purpose of this, in the sense that it shows a different way. And it shows a different way of doing things that I think is valuable. I think for us, for people that are subscribers that have been subscribers to AOD from the jump, right? I think this is a lot of, sort of kind of putting it all in one place. I think if you've never heard of me and you pick this book up, it's going to be something that might be a little shocking to you in terms of how we build teams. So I think it's for everybody. I'm excited for that. And one of the things that I was most excited about is I was trying to challenge myself to do basically the thing of to put it all on one page. And I spent a ton of time trying to think about how to do that. I spent a ton of time thinking about, how many things could I put in a chart. The idea was actually came out of a chart that was shared with me. I think it was in a group chat at some point, but it was shared with me that the Cleveland Browns have. And it was basically like, here are all the things we believe about team building. And it was an interesting thing to look at. I thought for the purposes of actually looking at it for Dynasty, it had to be a little bit more to it. Not that building NFL teams is less complicated than ours, but there's some specific different things that we think about and some different ways. Startup drafts, the NFL doesn't have those, so we have to address those positional stuff, right? Just a little bit different stuff in terms of how we look at it. So I wanted to put it all in one spot. So the last chapter, so chapter 11, is essentially just a chart. It is a chart of basically all the rules in one place, all the things that we believe in one place, which was a lot of fun to write. I got feedback from a handful of different people. That thing took a long time to do. I want it to be so that way you can print it out. It's color-coded and everything. That way you can print it out or download it or take a picture of it when you're in a draft or whatever. And when you're thinking through a decision, right, that'll give you the way to go, right? That's not the answer to every question, but that's really kind of where you go, right? Wide receivers over running back early, right? Running back, running back average deep down the board doesn't matter, right? Wide receiver average is a lot more important than anything, right? At the position, right? Different things like that we know that almost to a point of like, I've kind of taken for granted of like, hey, here's some stuff that I know and we just sort of talk about. And I've almost sort of taken it for granted that people have known. So, again, I write this every year and it becomes one of those things where I know it. I kind of know my own stuff better than anyone because I spend so much time with it sort of in my own head. So it is kind of nice to sort of take a step back and try to do, not drill down, but actually go up to like 50,000 feet and look down on it and say, here are the things that we believe. So that's all the rules in one spot. And if you someone mentioned in the chat, if you wanted to start someplace, I don't think chapter 11 is the wrong place to start. So there's that. A couple of things that are pretty awesome this year. So each year for the rebuilding guide, I have sort of the team, it's basically a living journal essentially at this point. I went through some of the rebuild stuff and I've kind of added to it each year to sort of take through the journey, which I think is different content than people really put out there. Again, I don't necessarily love it being all focused on my stuff, but I do think if you can sort of detail in your stuff, I do think that's stuff that people have found helpful in the past. So I like doing that. I found some of the trades as I went back and looked at it fascinating. People will tell you that you can't win with elite running backs because the longevity factor. I netted Josh Jacobs and Austin Eckler in that league in trade downs. They finished as running back 1 and running back 3. I netted them in trade downs. Eckler in a trade down and a first. Okay, and I got Josh Jacobs. I don't know if it was technically a trade down. It was Jameis Winston for him, and like there was a pick swap in there, right? It wasn't expensive. I think that and it was actually a cascade. It was part of a cascade deal. So I think when you look at those things, I think it's really interesting some of the stuff that's so believed in Dynasty in the Dynasty mainstream, that it's very different than a lot of the things that have proven to be true. So, at least for me. So, I did like sharing all that stuff. I'm proud of the fact, too, that we have 2 different subscriber contributors in this as well. They are chapters, let's see here, 7 and 8. They are chapters 7 and 8 of the book. Yo Mama, or Larry, Yo Mama is the street name. Larry does one, as well as Mike. I was struck by those because it's interesting when I thought they got to the same type of chord, but actually came at it a little bit differently, which I thought was interesting. I'll play spoiler on this. Mike wins a championship, and I think he just lulled everyone to sleep in the offseason. Like, it just kind of was like over and over and over and over and over good process. And then all of a sudden you look at the team, you're like, what happened? Like, it was like, it just was very additive. So I found that to be really, really compelling. I do a couple of trade things in there as well. Or a couple of startup drafts in there as well, to kick all that in. There is 2 things that I brought back that I thought, if I'm actually going to do a comprehensive team guide, they have to be in there. That was the running back valuation stuff from, I think it was the 2020 edition, or it was the second one. I think it was the 2021, the 2020 year edition, right? The one that was released this time in 2020. I believe it was from that one. And then I brought back the hierarchy of assets, which, I mean, that's how I kind of see the world. So I thought that had to be in this as an actual team building guide there. So that's the overall process about it. And it was a fun experience. So it was a fun experience to write. I have some good quotes at the beginning of it. I've managed to quote a Nobel laureate and Blink-182 on the same page. So I challenge any Dynasty writer to do that, and show me where it fits in thematically, quite like ours did. So, all right, I'm going to take some questions. I got some questions in here. If anyone has questions, drop them in. That link is the easiest way because it just actually aggregates them right for me. And I'll be able to respond. 16-team Superflex startup with 6-point passing touchdown, drafting from 102 after taking Mahomes or Allen at 102. That's what I would do. What are the lowest quarterback tier you'd feel comfortable taking as your quarterback 2? You're going to be in a spot where, right, it's even more important at quarterback to, if you get 2 really good secure ones in a 16-team league, you're really running up an edge on people. So, like, I might go, I'd be curious to see sort of what that looks like when you get back to it. I think in a format like that, there's always going to be demand for quarterback. So, I would, listen, if I'm in a 16-team league, I am at this point in the offseason, I think your best bet is to explore trade up. I always think trading up in a startup draft is best done early. That's one of the things I talked about in the book. And one of the reasons why I think it's best done early is because all the risk, and you'll sort of see this is a theme that happens in the book, all the risk, or a lot of the risk, more risk, disproportionate amount of risk, is faced by cheaper guys. So your cheaper guys are more likely to have guys drafted over them. They're more likely to have guys signed in free agency. They're more likely to have competition internally on their team, right? And I'm talking about receivers, running backs, tight ends, right? All of those quarterbacks, all of those things are true, right? Your cheaper guys are disproportionately more likely. That's true for guys in startup drafts, which we sort of talk about in the book. It's true for guys in rookie, young players as well, guys that were recently drafted in the NFL draft. So the risk is a lot higher. I also have some rates in the book about how the offseason affects different groups of players, which I thought was an interesting thing. There's a lot of truisms in Dynasty. I don't think anyone backs it up with data. We actually have some data that actually shows different parts of the positions are actually impacted differently, which I think is an important thing as well. I think it's one of the more valuable things that I understood in this. All that is to say that if you're sitting here early, right, and you have a scenario where you can trade up for an elite quarterback at the price of depth, do it, because that depth is super fragile and the elite quarterback super sturdy. So the answer to this question is I would do anything to get up into the top 3 to 5 and draft 2 of them, right? When I say anything, I would try and do it if at all possible without a future first giving it up. But I will say, if you want to, if you want to give up a future first, like, in a format like this, if you get a top 10 quarterback out of it, that's the way to go. So I would explore that for sure. To truly answer the question, sort of what would I be comfortable doing? I mean, I suspect in this format that guys like Watson and Prescott will be gone by the time you get there. Deeper down, like I'm in on Wilson. I think he's a bounce back candidate. I think we already see him rising this week, which should be of no surprise. Cousins, I'm sure, is probably available in there. You might even go, can you go Wilson, Stafford? I haven't seen enough startup draft ADP, and I'd be curious to see how these guys go off the board. But I would, if you can draft 3 guys, relatively early in the draft, I think it makes some sense, especially attacking a premium. Especially, I wouldn't take a ton of risk at quarterback early in this format. I would just try and get as many guys as I could, and then constantly hammer the position, attack premiums. I would do that throughout this, right? Jordan Love, just keep it. Jacoby Brissett is depth, right? Just in this format, this early in the offseason, attack the premiums over and over and over again. Hope that helps. With Peyton to Denver, has your Russ outlook changed at all? How high are you taking him in a super flex startup draft? Well, that's a good question. I don't trust keep trade cut all that well with their quarterback valuations because I don't think that they're right, at least in relation to the other positions. They're probably right internally, but I am a little skeptical of their rightness sort of between positions. He was he was quarterback 23 as recently as like the beginning of January. He's bumped up to 17. That makes some sense. I think he finishes this offseason as a high quarterback too, or an ADP. I think he's going to bounce back. I think the Peyton stuff's going to help him. If you can nab him at quarterback 20 prices right now, I think you're almost certainly going to be a profit, right, before you even actually see him play. So that would sort of be my thought there. I am not scared of the Russ profile. I think things went very poorly last year, but I don't think that like his season's over. You can say it went poorly. You can also say that it went poorly and there was bad variance, right? I think that's one of the things, like when you look at some of the expectation stuff like that, he was under in terms of touchdowns, right? If he had performed over expectation in terms of some fantasy scoring, but still didn't play that well, we wouldn't be here, right? And that's all variance. So I think that this is a unique time to buy him low. Again, I kind of trust in Sean Payton. Low priority question. I don't believe there's anything as low priority. We'll get this. Everything's good priority. I understand this is a dynasty space, but many of us also played in some redraft. What are some strategies you've found through your dynasty analysis that's particularly effective in redraft? Congrats on the new book. Thank you. I think that, a lot of, right. So one of the things that people will, attack me for, is the running back longevity questions, right? Which obviously isn't if I'm taking Samaje Perine at running back, 48 versus, KJ Osborne, right? Some random wide receiver in that range, right? The argument is, the wide receiver's got more value long term. Well, great. Like, what difference does that make? A, I don't really think that's true data-wise. B, I don't think it really matters. And C, whatever value that I can get Perine in the lineup is probably going to be better than what I can get Osborne in the lineup. So all of those things, right? So that's not present in Dynasty or in redraft, right? You're not as much worried about it. People will still go wide receiver heavy because they want to play wide receivers in the flex. I don't want to play wide receivers in the flex. I actually went through a league in this book where I think I started Gabe Davis every week. I won the league. and it was a mandatory start 3. And I started literally 3 every week. No more, not any week. And I just ground down the opponents in the flex. Just bludgeon. And that included, by the way, like some Dallas Goedert weeks where I actually got it way wrong. Like there was some stuff in the book that's pretty funny about how I implemented our strategy, did it frankly poorly, and came out way ahead, right? And it's not necessarily poorly in a way that's like I was screwing up the strategy. It's just like, hey, I kind of like just decided wrong on lineup decisions, but I was so far ahead from a strategic perspective that there's a lot of leeway there. So I think that's a lot of the stuff, right? Playing to the format. I continue to sort of double down on, the positional construct stuff. And I think there's even less risk to it because you're just trying for the elite outcome. We know rostering a ton of running backs and playing tight at wide receiver. We know that that's higher ceiling. And so that's what you're trying to capture. So I really lean into that. Any positional premiums too, I lean hard into those. And just take as many high end swings as you can. And again, being like super active, like kind of being a week ahead in the waiver wire, I think is pretty valuable, especially when you're in a format that doesn't in redraft. This isn't an insult to redraft people, but if there's not, if you're playing with people that play redraft, they're probably not going to the depths that you're going to go on the waiver wire, right? They're probably not in on. I don't have a great example from this year, but they're not in on running back 3s, right? They're not thinking at the depths of sort of churning out running backs that we are. So that would be something I kind of think ahead about. And I think that's an edge in a redraft format with people that don't play a lot of Dynasty. Got a super flex league where I have Mahomes and Rodgers. What type of urgency should I have with so many uncertainties for Rodgers' future? It's a good question. I wouldn't panic. You don't have a lineup need in February. So I think this one's one where you have a lot of options, right? In a worst case scenario, you don't like Mahomes and a couple of other guys playing, at the top 10 of their position, probably going to drag you to the playoffs. And so, even if the rest of your lineup is like replacement level, like that's kind of how the math works out. So, I wouldn't super panic on this, but I would be looking at options, right? I would start, and I have the whole quarterback chapter in there about how to fix position. So, go sort of implement those strategies, right? I think quarterbacks is a position where you spend a lot of time trying to get elite assets, right? I don't think that wide receiver is a position that you should do that at. I don't typically think that running back's a position that you should do that at. I think quarterback is, like, if you're going to spend your time doing something, like, spend it trying to trade for elite quarterbacks, especially this early in the offseason. So that's always the option. I might take shots in a scenario like this on Russ. I might take shots on Stafford, right? Sort of do your buy low guys. And again, I think the volume approach can actually help you. Can you be in on, is Jameis Winston available as a throw-in in a deal? Is Andy Dalton available as a throw-in in a deal, right? You sort of just amplify your options, right? That would sort of be the thing that I would do. And in addition to always pursuing an elite upside quarterback. So that would be the blend that I would have. Are you the real one or the fake one? The real Jordan or the fake Jordan? I am actually the real one, and I didn't realize this, that the other Jordan. So I used to have a colleague who was a woman, and her name was Jordan, and she started like a couple of years after me. So I coined the nickname the other Jordan for her. So I was Jordan, and she was the other Jordan. So and that sort of stuck. So the other Jordan in our group chat decided that it would be funny to name himself the fake Jordan in the group chat and then actually use a picture of me and I didn't realize this until today. It looks like I have a mustache like drawn on my face, which is funny because I actually have a beard going right now. And it appears that I'm wearing a sombrero. So I thought that was pretty funny. But I am the actual real one. All right, will the Cowboys blow up their offense this year, maybe moving Dak and Zeke for picks, using Cooper as a bridge at quarterback this year and bringing a quarterback to lead? I doubt it. I don't know. They've kind of redoubled down on committing to Dak. Like, I don't know. I look at Dak Prescott and I think, like, all right, how many guys out there have actually led the league in offense? Right, he's basically done it. I think it's been 2 of the last 4 years. He did it. I think it was last year, and then for that period early a couple of years ago, he did it as well. He didn't do it for a full season, but sort of through before he got hurt, they were the league leaders in offense. So I think Dak Prescott's basically Joe Burrow 3 years from now. And again, that's not a knock on Joe Burrow. I know Cincinnati loves me. But what happens for quarterbacks is you get the benefit of rookie deal. You can be awesome on it. And then ultimately, like the price that you pay, right? The reason why you get paid is because you have to overcome the loss of the supporting cast around you, right? They pay you to overcome that, right? That is why you are paid, right? Unless you believe a quarterback can overcome a loss of, high-end wide receivers and a loss. I mean, just look at, the loss of Amari Cooper, the loss of Tyreek Hill for Kansas City, right? You start losing guys. Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to be the wide receiver 2 for Cleveland, right? Like you start losing guys. You start having to play with, lesser lines, right? You start having to play with a lesser defense because you're being paid $55 million a year, right? Like the reason that you're paid that much is you have to overcome the fact that you're going to have a team that's going to have to spend down at your supporting cast, right? You have to overcome that. That's why they pay you. We're going to see that with Cincinnati, right? I put out a tweet today that was, Cincinnati has to be very careful not to fall into everyone wants to project Bijan Robinson to Cincinnati. They have to be very careful not to fall into the Kansas City CEH trap. That's not to say that Bijan Robinson and CEH is the same player. That's not what I'm saying. The problem is when you get a quarterback that's going to get paid, all of a sudden you start running into some real financial constraints. Okay, and I'll give you an example. Okay, I will give you an example. Look at the career of DK Metcalf. Okay, he's been, I would say, very good, right? He was drafted in the after the Mecole Hardman year. So I believe he would be, I think this is his 4th or 5th year, the 2019 draft. Okay, so when you look actually at the 2019 draft, he went, I just want to make sure I have the numbers right here. He went 50. He went 64. He went 64. And that was the year that, the Chiefs actually took Mecole Hardman. You look at that, and then you kind of compare, where the Chiefs actually went with Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the end of the first round. And just sort of look at those two decisions, right? If they had hit on a guy if they'd taken a guy like Metcalf instead of taking Mecole Hardman, right? If you sort of look at that, just sort of think about them doing that and sort of the edge that would give you. Again, they missed on their guy, but let's think through the lens of if they had hit, and we'll just use DK Metcalf as a proxy. DK Metcalf currently is on a contract where he is signed for the rest of it has basically $24 million a year for the rest of the contract. Okay, that is the 7th most at the position. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Kupp, A.J. Brown, Diggs, and then Metcalf. And Metcalf's in there with Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and then it's like a tier break. Okay, so that's basically your top 10 of guys getting paid on their contracts throughout the rest of the year. Flip that over to the running back position for a second. Okay, there are, we'll say about 20 guys that are paid more per year at the running back position, at the wide receiver position, than the highest paid running back, who's Christian McCaffrey. Okay, Christian McCaffrey, let's see, we'll actually go down here. Robert Woods at $16.25 million is actually paid more per year than Christian McCaffrey is. Okay, so which of those positions would you rather have in a rookie deal? Would you rather have Bijan Robinson, or would you rather have a wide receiver? Right? Well, I can get a backup. I can get a running back in free agency a lot cheaper, right? I mean, if Josh Jacobs goes into free agency and draws $10 million this year, I think it would surprise a lot of people. Last year, the Eagles traded for and then signed A.J. Brown to a deal that was $25 million a year. Okay, they traded a first-round pick to pay A.J. Brown 2.5 times more money a year than a team signing Josh Jacobs could not pay any picks for and sign for $10 million. Okay, that is that's the finance game, right? And so that's the reason why you don't draft a running back early, because Bijan Robinson can be transcendent. He's still it's still a huge cost savings to have wide receivers over him, right? To draft an offensive tackle, to draft an edge rusher, to draft a cornerback, right? It's a depressed position, right? They're going to fall into the same sort of trap of doing that, right? And Cincinnati's going to start to sort of experience that same problem as Dallas has. So I found that to be an interesting comp in all of this. I could talk about Kansas. I think Kansas City's good. I think Cincinnati's going to have to trade T. Higgins because they can't afford to pay him. So that's sort of how I look at Dallas, right? I look at Dallas as basically kind of like the end process of where Cincinnati kind of is right now. Cincinnati got to a higher peak. We'll see how they bottom out, or how they what their level is, right? So I don't think they're going to bottom out and trade Dak. I don't think that's going to happen. It'd be interesting to see what Cooper Rush drew on the market. I think they're going to sort of rebuild around him, retool around him. It'll be interesting to see how they make the numbers work. They might even have to extend Dak and try and create some cap flexibility. We'll see. I think Dak Prescott's the quarterback of the future. All right. I cannot attend the session live. Unfortunately, there were some people in here who said that. So, thanks for sending in your questions. If you believe in an offense like I do in the Chargers long-term or dynasty, are you opposed to leaning into double or triple stacks with position players weekly, as well as rostering backups for production tails for what? I can't read out loud. As well as rostering backups for when production tails off or careers end. I have Herbert, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Gerald Everett, DeAndre Carter, Donald Parham, Jalen Guyton, and Chase Daniel. Or would you rather sell off some pieces as high-powered offense to diversify your risk weekly across positions? And that's from Jeremy. I would say it depends. I would be curious to know the depth of your league. Because guys like Parham, if you're in a 25-man league, I don't think you can afford to roster guys like Parham and Jalen Guyton. And DeAndre Carter's probably not rostered as well. If you're in a 53-man roster, I think that's a different story. So I think that's the one thing. So again, make sure your offense is optimized, and you might want to take a long-term bet in a team. You don't necessarily need to take it now, right? You can sort of, there was talk today that Josh Kelly's the next Tony Pollard. I was like, he's a bad version of Zeke Elliott. But right, if you want to take a shot at the Chargers offense, take a shot at him, right? That would sort of be the thing that I would think about. You can take a shot on a guy like Jalen Guyton or DeAndre Carter, assuming that your league is in a 40-plus man roster. You can take that in free agency, and you don't even necessarily know. Again, these are the type of risky profiles you're looking at early in the offseason. So just sort of make sure you're optimized there. I don't have a problem with it. Especially around a young quarterback. It will change, right? Again, you could have said a couple of years ago, I was in a league a couple of years ago where I was like, okay, I drafted, or I had Mahomes, and then I traded for Tyreek Hill, and I actually traded for Stephon Diggs as well, and I have Mahomes, Allen, Hill, and Diggs, so I had a double stack. And I was like, oh, this would be great for the next 3 to 5 years. I'm just going to be rolling it. And then 6 months later, the receiver Tyreek Hill was traded, and it was totally unexpected. I didn't anticipate it. So I do think, I do think that, that there's not, I don't think there's a ton of risk in that. But I will say, it's not for long. So don't expect to sort of be able to get that right long term would sort of be the thing that I would say. All right. Would you buy, sell Mixon for? What would you buy or sell Mixon for, given today's news? I doubt there's going to be buyers for a second or anything like that. It's kind of what I would have expected his valuation to be in. I don't think you're going to get a first. I would have added to him to get like a 2024 first, probably, if you were to like. I hadn't given it much consideration because my leagues haven't opened up 2024 first and a lot of them yet. So I hadn't really sort of explored that marketplace yet, but that would have been something I would have thought about. I doubt that's going to happen. I've seen some news today that he was, there was an arrest warrant issued for him and that it's come out that, his attorney is saying that it's going to be rescinded tomorrow. Like if I had $1 for every time a defense attorney told me something that didn't or wasn't going to happen, I would be very, very rich person. So I don't know what to make of all of that. We will see and let it play out. I'd buy for a fourth. I'd buy for a late third. Yeah, I'd do those deals. I thought he was a cut candidate before this. Again, I don't think if you're gonna have to decide between do I pay T Higgins or do I pay Mixon, you're gonna try and free up money. I think you got to cut Mixon, right? But again, I think it's going to be hard to sort of make all that work. But he's going to be he's going to be one of the consequences of that is kind of what I've thought anyways. So I think he's a potential cut guy, and we'll see here going forward. But yeah, I don't know. Let's see how the week plays out. He's, of course, presumed innocent and hasn't even formally been arrested yet. With Supermax quarterback number increasing this year, from what startup spot do you start considering trading up? I'll draft from 106 and feel confident I'll get Herbert or Watson. I think you should get Watson. I would try for both, would sort of be my thought. I think if you want to go, in that range, like I think Herbert's probably going to be a historically good quarterback 5 in Dynasty. I think that's probably, I talked about it, I think it's the podcast I released tomorrow about the AFC questions. I think it's tomorrow's podcast. I think I recorded it last night. I talked about how Herbert's like quarterback 5 at keep trade cut right now, and he's basically at the point where like he had what would I think be considered a little bit of a down year from like a ceiling perspective. But if you drafted him at 3, like you're perfectly like that's exactly like another hit. Sort of you have 3 hits in the midst of your rookie deal. Like that's a overwhelming early career success, right? You're in elite territory already, and he falls in price to quarterback 5. That's not an indictment of him. That's a endorsement of the rest of the position. You have guys like Jalen Hurts jump up there. You have Burrow actually jumping ahead of him as well. So I think he's going to be sort of historically discounted. Would sort of be my thought. I haven't seen enough ADP to trust yet. We're still waiting for some more to trickle in for the RDP tracker for this year. I would imagine that you're going to get a quarterback you like in the second round. I would imagine that that's true. So I'd certainly be thinking about that as well. Again, do you want to trade up for Herbert? I would go from I'd rather have Herbert than Lawrence, and that would be a meaningful upgrade for me. So if I was sort of sitting there and I had to move from 6 to 4 to make that happen, I'd probably do it. And then hope to really hammer out the quarterback in the second round. If Bijan goes in the first round, what tier of the running back position? That will put him instantly into being a star running back, I believe. He would technically qualify as a core. A core is a running back 6 through 13 in first round rookies. However, I think he would jump ahead of that because he would be in the top 5 of ADP would be my assumption. So I would imagine that he would be a star asset. Okay, next one here. That's it. Let's see. Is there any questions in the chat here? I got it. Okay. And then okay. Got all the questions, I believe. I'll just hit refresh here one more time. I am, if you're not a subscriber to Analytics of Dynasty, there is a promo code for it in the email for today's book. You can go ahead and get that. I talk up our subscription for a couple of reasons. I spent a lot of time doing it. It was 365 podcasts, I believe, last year. There was 380 the year before, 388 the year before. I don't know where the 23 difference came from. It must have been something I did weekly that I broke into a couple spots. I don't know. I have to go back and look because I didn't record less days, I don't think. Maybe a week less, but I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at that because I was curious when I saw that. But anyways, the um, yeah. So the subscription, you're gonna get all those podcasts, all the stuff we're talking about, a lot of hierarchy of assets stuff. The other thing that you get with the if you're new to the book, you're thinking about the book. For this year, if you're sort of newer to AOD, and you look and you see the hierarchy of assets, and you're like, okay, well, who goes in there? I can't publish it because it changes by market value, right? So if guys go up, guys go down, guys change, right? They change tiers. I can't really publish it and it'd be evergreen, but I do update it on the site, right? So that's something I can offer to subscribers that I can't really offer to book purchasers because I think it's a disservice. And it's almost like a fantasy magazine where, it becomes dated at the minute it's printed, which has always been the thing that I've tried to avoid with AOD books. But I can constantly update it and cover it with content on the website. So that's a thing that we'll see in this book that'll be very different for you. Some additional questions. Derek followed up. What was the last part you said about a move from 106 to 104? I would be fine. Like if you're at 106 and you want to sort of move up one spot to assure yourself Jalen Hurts or Burrow or Herbert, right? If those are your top 5 guys and you want to move up to assure yourself that's fine. Lamar Jackson in that mid first is probably discounted as well. I've expressed some concerns and questions about whether or not I want to, I want to see sort of what happens with him from a contract perspective. And again, the Russell Wilson changing teams factor, right? We'll add that into the Supermax caution, right? A caution sign in the Supermax category of if he's going to change teams, you got to be, at least open to maybe seeing that a little bit more. So those are the kind of the parts that I have a little bit of concern with about him, and I would have him. I feel more comfortable about his profile than I do about Lawrence's. So I think that is the that would be the move that I would be fine moving up one spot. I think there's a tier, to put it a different way. I think there's a tier in the top 2, and then I think there's a tier from 3 to 5, probably in startups this year, at least at the quarterback position. What's the benefit of the group me? What are you missing out most on? I'll be honest with you. I have been, I noticed things about the group me that are pretty awesome. And you see people who are new, who I know are new to Dynasty, or I know a little bit more about than people in the chat will. And I like to let people converse. I don't like to sort of be a dictatorial person. I worked for a dictatorial leader at my old job. It's the reason I'm not there anymore. One of a couple of reasons I'm not there anymore. But I always learned that, when he was in the room, no good ideas were passed around. So I like to sit back and let people converse. And if I think something's going in a way that I have additional stuff to add to, I will do it. But I don't like to just sort of come in and just, lay down the law for lack of a better term. So I like the conversation. I like to see that. I observe it without commenting a lot of times, just because I think people get stuff out of that, right? I have always gotten stuff out of that. I think that I think I observe other people do it as well. One of the benefits from that is I've seen people who came into Dynasty really green, or I knew that they came into Dynasty really green because they had told me, or we had conversations sort of offline. I've seen how they've interacted, and I've seen how they've gotten to be excellent Dynasty GMs. So that's the pitch, right? That's the pitch. I'm always there to sort of be there with people, but I don't want to sort of be a crutch either, right? So what we end up doing is we learn a lot from each other. I think we kick ideas back and forth, and then we really see growth, I think, in terms of the level of Dynasty GM that you are when you come in versus what you are now, right? And, we've got people who are writing chapters now, right? We've got people who are guests on podcasts. We've got people producing some content. We have really good Dynasty GMs. You're going to be interacting with good people. That's the huge benefit of it. And Tim, fortunately, shared, I'm newer to Dynasty and AOD. The group me is definitely worth it. Well, thank you, Tim. What do we do with Kyler Murray? Good question. So Kyler Murray was going to be like this year's Deshaun Watson for me a little bit. Is kind of what I thought about. Like, hey, if we lose the year, we got to kind of figure out a way to build around him to take him, right? That was one of the things with when we had Watson last year. I was like, okay, well, there's like some very natural, like Watson has some very natural foils. Like you take Watson, then you take Brady, right? Like they're going to blend pretty well together. If you lose Watson for an extended period of time, you get Brady to sort of backfill the year, and it blends, right? We don't have Brady as that option, right? I think as we get a little bit more information, we'll have a little bit more comfort on doing that. I am assuming that we're not going to get Kyler Murray all year. I think that's probably a Johnny Raincloud assumption, right? That's probably a pessimistic version of the most pessimistic view in the room. He's probably going to get back, but again, maybe if he gets back Thanksgiving, how good is that team? Do they just keep him out the whole year and tank for whoever? I don't know if they're in that business, but you get the idea. Like he's going to come back later in the season. We're not sure necessarily what we're going to get. So if you want to go him early, you have to sort of make. Right. Again, if he came to me in the second round, I think it's a smash pick. If I got to spend 107 on him, I don't necessarily love that. Right. So that's kind of how I would think about that. If he's gonna be part of your draft plan, if he's gonna be kind of at the bottom of your a tier that you're sort of sitting there and be like, he's the best player in the board, I got to take him. Just think about the consequences of that when you're selecting him. Right. This is, again, you go in with a lot of flexibility and say, I'm just going to sort of do smart things and let it fall where they may. Taking him cheap is a smart thing. And then you just have to say, all right, is my lean in going to be, if in 2 weeks I have an idea that Carr is going to be a starter someplace that I like, that, Rodgers is returning, right? Like we get some clarity on Kirk Cousins and, we get into, we have a better idea about what Ryan Tannehill's future is going to be, right? Those things will begin to become more clear as the month of February rolls on. You will have more options to go to, right? So I would say Kyler Murray is probably a better startup plan once we sort of we'll know more what to do or how to build around Kyler Murray as the offseason rolls on, right? I think that's a play that I'd probably just, if I'm going to do it now, I think there's a lot of risk of like, can I actually pair him with the right solutions as opposed to, hey, if I'm going to take him in a late March draft, I'm probably going to know like, hey, I can do Carr, I can do Rodgers. Here's 3 or 4 guys that I can sort of pair with, another elite quarterback to sort of really make this thing fit over the next year or two, right? I think that's what I would really be thinking about with Kyler. I wouldn't take him probably in the first round, in the middle of the first round, but if he's there in the middle of the second, it's pretty compelling. Even though I don't necessarily love the profile, like you have to kind of love it at that price. And then you have to kind of make the decision about, all right, am I just going to tank or am I going to sort of, draft? I don't ever like to tank, but if I'm going to draft some veteran guys around him, sort of how do I make that work, right? All that stuff. So yeah, so that's that's kind of the angles that I would be thinking on, right? It's multifactorial, which is was said on a podcast one time, and I was like, whoa, that's awesome. So that would be the thing that I would think about. So yeah. So again, I think that there's a lot that sort of goes into that, and those would be sort of the decision points. Those are the processes you have to make, and then your level of comfort, right? So that's all that there. So yeah. So that's I think all the questions here. I have let me just refresh here my sheet. Looks like that's it. If anyone has any last minute questions here, I can grab them here in the chat. But otherwise, I do appreciate everyone coming along. I want to say that I've been super blessed and fortunate with AOD. One of the things that I talked about this in the book, in the preface to the book, that my wife was actually, before I ever was like convinced that this thing could work, um, my wife was like, you have to do this. And, I was writing, I was doing the thing, and I was like, I think we could, make AOD kind of I was kind of pitching what AOD has become to her as like a kind of, just throwing stuff against the wall. And this was maybe like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And she knew that like at that point I was pretty unhappy with the stuff that I was doing in my day job. The dictatorial boss that I referred to earlier. And so, we'd kind of thought about it, all that stuff. And then, I actually left that job. I went to a different job, and and then COVID happened, and it was like a 6-week span where those things happened. And that was after the release of the 2020 edition. So that would have been the second edition of the book. And again, the Patreon, I started just recording Patreon stuff. Actually, I went back and looked. I misremembered this. And because I was actually, funny story, I work like 3 days a week, 4 days a week out of a Starbucks. And I've become friends with the manager, and she was asking me kind of about the business. And I told her that I had launched it, during COVID. And then I actually went back and I looked. The Patreon started in January of that year. And I forgot that I had actually launched it from that Starbucks. And so it was in the 2-week span between my jobs. It was actually when I got off the thing, and then COVID took off. And so I just started doing Dynasty Dailies. Right? That's how it all took off. But I was fortunate and blessed to sort of be that all fell together in a way that I never really thought that would happen. So I'm super lucky, right? And I'm super lucky that, that I've met a lot of people. It's funny because I tell my wife all the time, like, I need to meet some, like, friends in real life, right? Like, I have a lot of friends, and I have a lot of interests that don't make me a lot of friends in real life. Like, I like to ride my bike, far distances, like in the middle of nowhere, which isn't super social. And I like to spend my time, like, talking about football at a high level and reading spreadsheets, which doesn't subject me. You have conversations with people about football. When you think a lot more about than other people, like what those conversations can, they can leave you a little bit emotionally lacking at times, we'll say. So I have been fortunate in my life to be able to meet a lot of people in ways that I frankly would never have, without AOD. So that's left me very happy. I also, I had applied for a job, I interviewed for a job, went through the interview process for a job that was in the fantasy space, and it was going to be one of those things where it was like, is this going to sort of cost, am I going to have to give up AOD to do this? And my almost instant reaction as I was sort of applying for the job and it became a reality was like, that's not really what I want to do. Like, I don't, but the offer was interesting, like it was compelling, but it was going to require a lot to make it work. And as I kept going through that process, I just kept realizing, like, they were nice. Like, it was a good experience. They treated me fine and everything, but that was not what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to do this, and and it became clear after a couple of meetings. Like, it was just never going to emotionally satisfy me in the way that AOD does, and interacting with all you guys does, and and the work process that goes behind this and all that. So it was one of those things where it was like, okay, is AOD kind of here to stay, right? And it always sort of was in the back of my mind, but someone kind of dangled something in front of me, and I realized, like, AOD's here to stay, because it's here for the long term. Because I realized that once I started to talk about not doing it anymore, it like made me kind of nauseous. So that's kind of the AOD State of the Union, and kind of where we're at. So again, I'm super thankful, again, for all the relationships that are here. They're awesome, for all the stories and for all the subscriber, kick-assery that goes on in their leagues. Like, that stuff gives me a lot of energy, and it gives me a lot of optimism, and keeps me constantly sort of searching for edges, because I use them, and then I know you guys are using them, and we're benefiting from it. So I just want to thank everyone for being here for this. Again, it's a little AOD State of the Union. Oh, a good question here. AOD Learning's paid for my family vacation this year. First year in, made $1,300 on $425 of entries. There you go. There you go. So that's the endorsement from the subscription. My ROI last year was, I believe, 132%. So someone asked that as well. So, and Derek, we get the trade data from the Football Guys forum. So that'll do it here for this edition. And thank you all for pre-ordering. Thank you all for being here. This has been awesome. And I will probably release this as a pod in some way, shape, or form. I haven't quite decided how I'm going to do that yet, but I will share that along if you want to listen back. But thank you. I appreciate you being here, and that'll do it for this Q&A. And I want to do some more of these too, so we'll talk about that amongst subscribers as well. So that will be stuff that we'll be looking forward to new content here going into 2023. So that'll do it for this one. Until next time, we'll talk again. Continue embracing the variance, and we'll talk again very soon.